We are better than this. And so this is a moment in time that is requiring us then to fight for the best of who we are as a country.
But we've got to respond to them, not just with our voices saying hell no. We got to respond to them at the ballot box.
It's not enough for us to show who they are. We got to tell them who we are. What do we stand for?
Well, good morning and welcome to AM Joy. We are now just 16 days away from the crucial midterm elections with control of Congress at stake. Not to mention the question of whether voters will impose a check on Donald Trump and whether the Republican Party and frankly, whether Republican voter suppression will work or not. Now, if you've worked in politics or even just followed politics closely, you know that the deadliest thing in the closing days of any election is overconfidence. And this morning, there are new signs that Democrats should not fall prey to overconfidence heading into Election Day. A new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll shows that Democrats have a small edge over Republicans in voter enthusiasm among likely voters. The Democrats do maintain a 9-point lead in the generic congressional preference among likely voters. The poll also shows Donald Trump's approval rating ticking up to 47% among registered voters and 45% among likely voters. Underwater, but still more helpful to Republicans than his old numbers. And joining me now is Nayyera, former State Department senior advisor. Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com. Jennifer Rubin, opinion writer at The Washington Post. And Republican strategist Katon Dawson. Thank you all for being here. So let's talk about the question of this blue wave. That's what the sort of meme has been. But as we know, I'll start with you on this, Jason. You'll never be too confident in anything, right? Because we don't know anything until people actually vote. So are Democrats, where do you see Democrats sort of standing right now as we head in 16 days?
So I'm looking at county numbers, and I'm looking at early voting county numbers. The biggest concern that you have for any party, Republican or Democrat, is you don't want your early voting to cannibalize your on-day voting, right? That's the thing. If everybody votes early and then they don't show up on Election Day, it's a problem. We've seen over-performances right now in Clark and Washoe County, but you've also seen increase in voter registration. You're seeing the same thing in Georgia. I don't think that Democrats are going to be overconfident because you've got too much voter suppression going on. But the numbers suggest that they have expanded the number of people who are voting. So it's not just a matter of people voting early. You're going to have more people on Election Day. I think this is going to be a very good day for Democrats. Again, I think Republicans will admit privately the House is done. They know it's done. They've been pulling back money from the House. The issue is going to be how some of these governor's races work, and that's going to be to the wire. That's the wire.
And so let's look at, and this is number one for my producer. So who is most interested in voting? Seniors, as always, 73% express high level of interest in the midterms. Democrats are next at 72%. Latino voters, 71%. Then white voters with a college degree, not surprising, 69%. Black voters, always high, 68%. Then Republicans, tied at 68%. And then women. So, Nayyera, so you have the sort of traditional midterm electorate, which is usually older and whiter, so check, seniors, white college degree. That's normal. But the question is whether Democrats can change the fact that low-interest voters tend to be younger and people of color. Do you see evidence? I mean, you're on the radio every day talking about this. Is there evidence that maybe Democrats can change that formula?
I think there is, in particular when you see the candidates that are running also. You see a lot of women, you see a lot of people of color running, and younger people who really were disenchanted with politics before, who after the travesty of the Trump administration are starting to realize why government matters to their day-to-day lives. I think we are making a mistake as Democrats on focusing on the Betos and the higher ticket candidates when it's really the down ballot races that need every single vote. Beto, for example, very compelling on the national stage, but he needs to make sure he's able to turn out every single Democrat and Latino voters who traditionally underperform and, frankly, are not registered at the numbers that he needs to win. Now, the enthusiasm for him could trickle down to, say, attorney general races, secretary of state races. These are the ones that really will make the change the electoral map for the future. There is a ballot initiative and effort in Florida to take back the state Senate. That will determine how redistricting happens. All the gerrymandering complaints, those are going to be down ballot. So Democrats cannot make the mistake of only focusing on these higher ticket brand name candidates.
Yeah, and let me get Katon in, because Katon, your party's been very good at making sure that they cover the field. They go all the way down to school board. Republicans have been flooding the zone, making sure that they take every local race that they possibly can. A couple of different headlines. Washington Post saying that the wave election sort of idea may be not as big of a wave as Democrats might have hoped for, because you do have Donald Trump somewhat rebounding in terms of his approval rating. He's still underwater, but not as underwater. And that the Cook Political Report is now giving Democrats a 70 to 75% chance of winning the House. One more headline in the New York Times, GOP candidates struggling in key battleground states. And it says here Republicans are increasingly worried that their candidates for governor and Senate are in political trouble in places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, and other states that the party prizes, and that could actually spill over into House races for the GOP. What are you looking at as a Republican strategist? How likely is it that your party loses the House?
Well, it's historically likely, but as Republicans and as an operative, you look at the organization and the machine the Republicans have built, and that started years ago, but really was accelerated with Karl Rove and George Bush and his 8 years in the White House of putting an infrastructure in the local state parties, in the Republican National Committee, to not do the sexy work, but to do the hard work. And we learned that with victories during the Obama administration. One thing that I will fault the Obama team was they did their own political party and left the Democrat National Committee and state parties out there to fend for themselves. There's a huge difference in the organizational setups when it comes to that, and that's because Rove and Bush understood what redistricting meant to the Republican Party and what a local House member and local Senate members mean to the Republican Party. So in the overall scope of things, certainly the president's numbers are helping us. They're not hurting us right now like they were 30 days ago or 45 days ago. This really is down to about 25 seats in the House that Hillary Clinton won that were Republican seats. And they've got to win about all of those and run the deck to get the House. That's possible. I think the Senate races, I think we're going to increase the numbers in the Senate, and that's courtesy of AKA the Kavanaugh hearings. And we're not going to have this bloodbath landslide that everybody's predicting. And also to address, Joy, what I would call lazy voters. They're lazy voters for a reason. They don't vote unless there's a general election with the president in it. We have spent money to get those people to try to vote on our side. We watch them, you push them. There's the millennial vote. It is a very, very hard vote to get out. Very hard, especially when you have a 60% drop from the 200 million registered voters in a presidential year, and then you have you got 40% that'll vote then. So it's really, really hard to bring your numbers up with lazy voters.
Well, and let me come to you, and I know Katon meant Democratic National Committee. He's my friend, so I know that's what he meant. But let's go. I'm going to bring you in here, Jennifer, because so Democrats do have a challenge every other election, right? Democratic voters are very focused on the White House. They're White House-oriented voters. Republican voters tend to be more consistent in terms of voting in every election. There are fewer of those drop-off voters. So I wonder if among, friends, among people that you're talking with that are usually voting Republican, if there's a shift in those very consistent voters, people who do vote, but who may be changing their mind about how they're voting.
Absolutely. I think there are two groups of people that the Democrats are going to rely on to increase their wave, to lengthen and deepen their pickups. One is the occasional voters, and the reason why it's different in the Democratic Party than the Republican Party is that in the Democratic Party you have these dynamic candidates of color who are appealing directly to those voters.
Right.
And they're running on issues that are fundamental. They're voting on Voting Rights Act. Yep. They're voting on Medicaid expansion. So there's actually people like them, like these occasional voters, for someone to vote for. So that makes a big difference. Second group of people are people like me, women in the suburbs, college-educated women, white women. These people are fleeing the Republican Party. And for all the talk of Kavanaugh, what we've seen is all that has really done, in terms of the sheer numbers, is pump up enthusiasm from women who are furious. And I think this is still an underreported story, in part because, unfortunately, most pundits are male, most political consultants are male, and they underestimate the extreme anger that women are feeling. And you see now, for the very first time, some coverage of the network of women, volunteering of women, women donors. And I think those people are not going to be dissuaded. They may not have even been involved in politics. And now these people are furious. And unfortunately, in our politics, fear and anger is a great motivator.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to Katon on this for just a second, because I do wonder if, Republicans are, we talked about overconfidence in the open about Democrats, but I wonder if Republicans are overconfident in what Kavanaugh means. Because for a lot of women, even women who aren't particularly political, what that means is a man saying, I'm entitled to power even if I have been potentially abusive toward women, and that this is my entitlement, and that there is, I actually even anecdotally see it among people I know that are Republicans that are saying, this guy is an entitled man who's up there crying and screaming because he wants more power, but look at what he did to this woman. So I wonder if Republicans are underestimating what Jennifer called the fury of women about that, and whether they're also underestimating the fury, quite bluntly, of Black and brown and Native American and Asian American people about this aggressive voter suppression that members of your party are engaged in.
Well, we can argue about the voter suppression, and we have in the past, but I would tell you what it did was it motivated the Republican Party from the Kavanaugh hearings. And I will tell you that whether they like it or not, the American public, especially the people who watch our shows, has changed. Their tolerance level has changed, and that's courtesy of Donald Trump. It's changed. They take hard rhetoric. And that's just the fact. I'm not giving you an opinion. I think everybody will agree with that. So what they saw in the Kavanaugh hearings was what I see in some polling in rural America as something that wasn't fair. And so at the end of the day, it has reminded Republican voters that they voted for Donald Trump, that they wanted a tax policy. It reminded them to go vote. The question is, 16 days is a lifetime in politics to keep the heat up to get people to go vote. And there's not early voting in every state. It's not there. That would be my answer and my summary to the Kavanaugh hearings.
Kavanaugh, listen, the polling shows overwhelming. He is the least popular Supreme Court justice. He's in the negative. If you look at every poll, AP recently, 1 in 4 people think he was telling the complete truth. So I think it's a rallying cry for people who are returning to the party anyway. As the election draws near, people come home to their party. And you're going to expect that in Texas people are going to vote Republican. I don't think it has anything to do with Kavanaugh at all.
Well, and also because fair, if you're a white guy, means I get what I want.
Right, like this notion of
the only thing that's fair.
Yeah, lots of people saw this as unfair. They saw it unfair that this guy was basically living out an 80s movie, throughout his whole life and didn't have any consequences. This is the key thing I think about Kavanaugh. And I do think Republicans are overestimating, because at the end of the day, Brett Kavanaugh is not most voters are not thinking Brett Kavanaugh has anything to do with my health care, anything to do with my roads, anything to do with my schools. A lot of Republicans got excited. It helped them for Senate races, right? But it hasn't moved these governor's races. It hasn't moved Pennsylvania, hasn't moved Minnesota, hasn't moved Michigan, hasn't moved Wisconsin. Those are the places where this really, really matters. And at the end of the day, as bad as voter suppression is, and it's terrible, and it's happening all over the country, for once, for the first time in decades, the Democrats are ready for it. And they actually have a plan on the ground to actually bring people in. I don't know if it'll make a difference, but it's helping.
And lastly, on voter suppression, Clayton didn't answer it, but I'll ask you to answer it. The idea of having your vote potentially suppressed and stolen actually is a motivator for a lot of people, no?
Absolutely. People, this goes to the anger that's happening in the base right now. And it's the same kind of anger that motivated a lot of Trump supporters. At least we have it now on the Democratic side, where they want to be heard. They want to be represented, to the point where there are initiatives to actually give back felons their vote, because people are understanding how fundamental a right it is and are now defending all of those in the face of the attacks on the Constitution.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Two motivated parties coming to the polls. We'll see what happens. 16 more days to go. Nayyera Hawk, thank you. Jason Johnson, thank you guys. Get some rest, have some brunch. Jennifer and Katon will be back with us. And up next,